Hi everyone, I'm Amanda from Prana Thrive and I have with me here Tracey, and we are going to talk today about gut healing versus gut health. So there are definitely misconceptions around foods and supplements to use for gut health, but it really depends on what stage of digestive issues you're experiencing. And so for a lot of clients that we see, we really need to start with that gut healing phase. So in today's video, we're going to talk about different symptoms that relate to that, how we can really identify whether you are in fact needing that stage of gut healing, and some of the different foods and supplements that and other lifestyle factors that we find really helpful in that phase, and how it differentiates from gut health. So gut healing is, there are many symptoms actually that can really indicate that you are experiencing a lot of gut lining inflammation and need that gut healing. Some of those symptoms are digestive issues, some of the really common symptoms like bloating or reflux, experiencing food reactions. But we can have many other symptoms that also indicate that our body is really in that state of requiring that sort of gut healing. Did you want to mention a few of those, Tracey?
Yeah, sure. So I think there is so many beautiful herbs and supplements and foods that we can use to maintain gut health. But if you do have symptoms such as reflux, IBS, constipation, loose bowels, it's going to take more than just having some foods that are good for gut health, that say taking a probiotic or having some prebiotics, some fermented foods, which are all great for the gut. But I think there needs to be a plan in place to actually heal the gut. So we've got a plan in place to restore the gut lining, to restore function to all areas of the gut. And of course, we treat holistically as well. We look at how everything interacts and impacts the gut health. So we don't just look at gut health in isolation. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of information out there to say, for example, fermented foods are awesome for the gut, but they can, if they're introduced at the wrong phase of the gut healing, then it can actually cause more grief than good. So I think that is one thing that I see a lot of my patients, when they come to me, they're taking all of these amazing supplements or amazing foods, but we need to take a step back and have a structured approach to the healing, and that's when healing can actually occur. And sometimes it means we have to remove those foods just for a bit and introduce them later when the gut is ready for them.
Yeah, that's right. And that's definitely something that I see, especially in a first consultation with a lot of clients, is looking at some of the supplements they've already tried. And recently, especially, I feel like I've had so many clients come to see me on so many supplements, whether they've been prescribed by a practitioner, they've researched themselves. In a lot of cases, people have researched and started, and tried, because there are some amazing supplements out there, but ultimately they're just starting to feel worse, which is why then they are looking for a different approach. So looking at the type of supplements, sometimes, actually removing some of those supplements initially and really focusing on how we can reduce some inflammation first, and look at something that called leaky gut. So when we've got gut lining inflammation, when our gut lining cells are inflamed, this is commonly termed leaky gut or intestinal impermeability. And this is something that a lot of people are experiencing, and that's why certain foods and supplements, especially fermented foods, really start to create quite an extra trigger and people start to feel worse. But it doesn't mean that those foods and supplements won't be helpful to support the growth later on, to optimize our gut health. But in the gut healing phase, those are not helpful for the person.
Yes, yeah. And I think just to emphasize that it's going to be different for every single one. So when patients come to see us, we do the gut microbiome testing, and this gives us some information about whereabouts we can start that person on the protocol, how long they're going to need to be on that protocol before we can introduce the next phase or the next food or the next thing. It's a tailored protocol, but it's also got some structure as well. So it's really bouncing back and forth with the patient. How are they doing? How fast can we move through it? And so this is really about gut healing, not just about just taking some foods to help with maintenance of the gut. So, the gut microbiome testing is fascinating. So what's some things, Amanda, that you look for in that test to see at what stage, where that patient's at, how inflamed they are?
Yeah, that's I love doing a microbiome test. Well, I only use a microbiome test with clients now because I find it just takes away the guessing. It gives me a really specific area to focus on, like you just mentioned, the time frame, what needs to be addressed. So some of the types of bacteria that I look at are particularly Akkermansia. Akkermansia is a very important bacteria for the gut lining. And so understanding whether the person has any, because that's something I do see in many test results. Some people actually are missing the Akkermansia for various reasons. It has been totally wiped out. And so that is something that we really need to focus on, how we can initially reduce some inflammation, but then also how we can recolonize, or if there are some low levels, how we can really feed that bacteria, because that provides a really important foundation for our gut lining and that gut healing, but also an interaction with many other beneficial bacteria as well. Some of the other markers I'll look at is LPS inflammation. If the person has very high LPS inflammation, this has a variation of different bacteria that can be linked to that type of inflammation, but it often is a combination of high levels of some inflammatory or pathogenic bacteria. And they're the sort of things that we need to remove, help the body to remove those types of inflammatory bacteria, so then those other beneficial bacteria can really thrive. And that comes into then the reaction that some people have from adding in fermented foods in that initial phase, because if you have certain histamine stimulating bacteria, fermented foods can trigger more of a histamine type reaction for the person, or certain supplements may also trigger an inflammation response. So it's really important to understand a couple of those markers in the report first.
And I see bone broth being another one that people are very commonly using, and I love bone broth for all of its amino acids for gut healing.
Definitely, yes.
If it's introduced too soon, it can be very inflammatory and cause a whole pile of particularly histamine type reactions, which would be maybe itchy throat, a rash on the skin, anxiety, sleep disturbances, or even reflux. So
yeah, you're right. That's definitely something that I do see with a lot of clients. A flare-up of their digestive issues, IBS type symptoms can definitely be linked to that histamine response. Skin, I think skin rashes or body pain, unexplained sort of body pain is another common symptom that I see with a lot of clients when they're having that histamine type reaction. And so that in itself, if we're waiting for test results, those sort of symptoms are what we start looking at to see whether the person is having those sort of flare-up or histamine or inflammatory reactions. And so starting to use certain healing supplements, healing foods to reduce that inflammation first. And then obviously once we have the microbiome test, really understanding the level of inflammation and what very specifically needs to be addressed.
Yeah, so I also, with the Akkermansia, if it's well over the expected range, so it's expanded more than 10%, that's a very good indication that there is inflammation, and the gut lining is still going to be compromised because it's a nice balance that we need of the Akkermansia, and having too much is not going to be beneficial for the gut lining either. So
definitely, that's right.
It's that fine balance between the Akkermansia modulating that lining in the cells there. So that's a big tail sign. There's lots of inflammation if that marker is well above 10%. And I do see that in patients regularly.
Yeah, definitely.
Often, I will see particular bacteria that is good bacteria, so Akkermansia is a good bacteria, is high to try and compensate, to try and dampen down. It's like an anti-inflammatory type bacteria, but it's overcompensating for the level of inflammation that's going on in the gut.
That's right. And that's what we find the test really helpful is it's understanding the balance, because it's not just about low levels, it's also understanding some of those high, abnormally high levels and what that indicates. So like you mentioned, Tracey, definitely with the Akkermansia being very high, I would see that less often, but I've definitely seen that enough times now over the years, over 10, even up over 20% in a couple of people. And that usually starts to, it does indicate a high level of inflammation, but as a symptom, it can really cause quite chronic constipation. So because there's an extra mucus, there's too much mucus that's being produced by that high level of Akkermansia, and then that starts to create more of a sluggish bowel and then constipation. So, understanding the exact levels is definitely very important.
Yeah, very fascinating. I think repairing that gut lining is one of the foundational things that we do in the protocol.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what, like we've mentioned, the test provides that really detailed information so that we can create those different stages or steps. So for people who do have low Akkermansia or high Akkermansia, high LPS inflammation, some others are some different groups around lactobacillus or bifidobacterium. So there's a whole combination of different types of bacteria and different levels that we will see. But something I do see in a lot of clients is that they have a really low diversity as well. So diversity is the number of bacteria. So for someone that has a low diversity, and then if we look at the different groups, they maybe have very low Akkermansia. Sometimes I see the whole group of bifidobacterium. People are totally deficient in those, maybe some low Akkermansia and a few others, often then combined with that high LPS inflammation. And so then that really tells us there's a lot going on. There's a lot of deficiencies, a lot of inflammation. And so we really need to create at least a 3 to 4 stage plan. So that initial plan is really helping to reduce that gut lining inflammation in a number of ways. So certain supplements and foods. One of my absolute favorite ingredients or plant-based herbs to really help reduce that inflammation is Arabinogalactan from the larch tree. So it's one that I do often use with clients to really help reduce that type of inflammation. And then obviously if we've got a lot of pathogenic or inflammatory bacteria, we can use certain remedies that have been tested and proven to fight off those high levels and start to reduce and bring those down. And then that allows other bacteria to start increasing as well. Yeah, do you have some favorite ingredients that you like to use, Tracey, for gut healing?
Yeah, sure. So I do look at the diversity as one of the first things that I think we both look at. That's going to indicate how quickly and how fast that patient can move through the protocols and an indication that we might need to go a little bit slower because there just isn't that robustness there. But it's not the only thing. We sort of look at all the different markers. I look at the LPS, the Akkermansia and the commensal bacteria as well and consider whether and how many symptoms they actually are experiencing to how fast or slow we need to go and how careful we need to be. So I do like SPM or dampening down that inflammation. It's pro-resolving mediators and they're really new technology that's come on the market and is really good at quickly reducing that inflammation because when the inflammation is there, it makes it hard for healing to occur. So we do need to dampen that down. And that may mean keeping certain food groups out until your gut heals to allow that inflammation to drop a little bit. So, yeah, probably the SBM is one of my go-tos.
Yeah, that is, and it is, it is a fairly new type of supplement as well, but does have, very, like you said, very anti-inflammatory benefits, which is great.
Yes, and the one that we use at Prana Thrive has some fish oil in it as well, and the gut microbiome love the fish oil, as well as it being anti-inflammatory as well.
Yeah, that's right. Especially Akkermansia. Akkermansia is one of the bacteria that really thrives off omega-3 foods. So that's one of the ways that we can also support that bacteria and then therefore promote that gut healing. And then another fairly new supplement is also Akkermansia as a probiotic. So there are new types of probiotics regularly coming out as far as the different research and understanding that we have. But being able to take Akkermansia as a probiotic, if you have a 0 level or very low level, is amazing actually, as far as the benefits that I've seen in the last sort of couple of years that's been available compared to the many years before that we did not have that probiotic available to be able to take. So using different anti-inflammatory ingredients, whether in powders or capsules, taking something like Akkermansia to really support the growth or to recolonize for people who have 0 levels that show up, non-detected levels in their microbiome test, and then really focusing on those important omega-3 foods. So, and we can get that from fish, from nuts and seeds, from eggs. Actually, eggs is a big one that I talk to clients about. Eggs are definitely on the fence as far as whether for you personally they are part of a gut healing diet or whether they actually need to be removed. And one of the main reasons is that if you have a very high level of a group called Streptococcus, which I do see in a lot of clients, we know now from research that egg yolk is actually something that feeds that bacteria. So if for some people they're consuming eggs every day, and it would not have been the cause of that high level, but it definitely has contributed to feeding that strep bacteria to become higher. And so not needing to eliminate eggs totally, but removing them for at least a month or two is something I find often very, very helpful in that gut healing phase, and then using those targeted remedies to address that bacteria. But we can really focus on other omega-3 foods in that phase to promote that healing as well. Do you have some favorite omega-3 foods, Tracey, that you like?
Yes. Extra virgin olive oil.
Yes, definitely.
I think a very good quality. We want quality when it comes to oils.
Mm-hmm.
And I suggest putting it over top of salads and vegetables when you're having them. So aiming for maybe 2 tablespoons a day of the extra virgin olive oil. A really beautiful source of omega-3, and the gut loves it.
Definitely.
And wanted to talk a little bit about the eggs as well. So patients come to me and have actually said that the eggs don't do well with them. And so when we get the results back, it often teams up with them having that high strep. So reducing it for a little bit, because it's not necessary that they have an allergy to the actual egg itself, which it could be, but often it's just feeding the bacteria. So removing the foods for a bit, working on healing the gut. And then once the gut starts to heal, maybe 3 months later, we can start to bring that food back in. And that's generally what we see with all food intolerances, that our gut tolerates it much better, and we don't have that immune reaction occurring at that gut interface when the gut starts to heal. So I also wanted to talk about the Akkermansia a little bit further.
Sure.
So I know that you've done some retests with patients after taking the probiotic, because the Akkermansia is fairly new on the market, and the science is just growing on it, which is really exciting. But we want to actually see clinical outcomes. So can you share some of your stories about the clinical outcomes that you've had with retesting and inoculating?
I have seen very mixed results, but I've seen amazing results with clients where they've had very, very little or even no levels. We've used Akkermansia as part of their treatment plan, but obviously, like we've already mentioned, understanding whether other types of inflammation needed to be addressed at the same time, or to follow on with as well. So I've seen a client recently go from a non-detected level of Akkermansia to when we did her retest, which would have been at least 6 months later. So we followed a plan. I helped her follow through a plan over 6 months, and we had some regular consultations, and her plan was adjusted over that time. And then when we did her microbiome retest, she had in the high zone. So we have, when we look at the test, we have different categories or a scale of levels as far as what is low, what seemed to be, medium, but then what is the ideal. So for this client, it definitely was right up in the high ideal, not too high, but in that sort of ideal range. And that was only from taking a couple of months of that probiotic, but it was a combination of all the things that we had done together. So for that retest and definitely many others, very similar benefits. I definitely have had some clients as well where when we've done their retest, maybe a similar, could be 6 months, could be 12 months, that their Akkermansia has still been in the low zone as well. It's definitely improved, but for various reasons, it just hasn't increased enough. And so that retest information is really helpful. It doesn't mean that probiotic hasn't worked. We want to understand why those levels are still low. And so for some of those clients, very standout associated potential associated factors have been other types of inflammation that we maybe didn't realize initially were an issue. So with one client, for example, when I looked at that and started questioning and going back through her case history, she mentioned some mold exposure that she had had a few years ago. So it hadn't really come up initially when we had spoken. And so we looked at doing some extra mold testing, and she had extremely high mold levels. Mold toxins, extremely high mold toxins in her system. And that is, if we look at why the reasons to why Akkermansia would thrive or not thrive, it's toxic inflammation that would contribute to a non-thriving Akkermansia. So once we had that further understanding, we did, left Akkermansia out for a little while, started to do some more mold detoxing work. We can use some really specific binding type supplements. And then we reintroduced Akkermansia, and that definitely was really helpful. Her symptoms started to improve a lot more from that point.
Yeah, that's just a really good point to how treating the whole person is imperative in improving gut health. So let's get back to some foods that are good for gut health but may not help with actually healing the gut. So just so people can actually identify, maybe they've included these foods, but we want them in a specific order, in a specific protocol. So I know we've touched on prebiotics, probiotics, fermented foods, and bone broths.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything else, and do we need to break it down a little bit? What is a prebiotic?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because I realize that a lot of people, there's all these different names, pre-pro, there's post as well. But a prebiotic is essentially a food for our probiotic bacteria. So it could be an actual food like sweet potato. Sweet potato is a great resistant starch. And resistant starch is a prebiotic or a food source for a lot of different beneficial bacteria. Then we have other food groups. We have omega-3, like we just talked a little bit about. And then we also have certain fiber that we get from different nuts and seeds, particularly seeds. I like to really focus on seeds initially with clients, but having them in a form, actually this is important to talk about, the form that the food is consumed in. So for example, chia seeds and hemp seeds are a really great source of fiber. They're also a great source of omega-3. So they're great for feeding our gut bacteria. But if you have a lot of food intolerances and reactions and that gut lining inflammation that we've talked about, depending on how you consume those seeds could be irritating to your gut lining as well. So we want to make sure that they're ground, either pre-ground before you add them into a granola or yogurt, coconut yogurt type situation, or smoothie. I do find a smoothie is a really, really great option, because then all those ingredients ground up, they're easy to digest, and you're getting the nutrition from those, but you're also combining that fiber with some extra prebiotic or antioxidant type foods like your berries, for example. It's a great addition to a smoothie, but also really helps to feed our gut bacteria as well. So, but then there are certain foods, in those categories that can be a little bit irritating not for everyone though. So that's why having that individual approach, that, for example, sweet potato can be a great additional food source for a lot of people, but we just want to start having very small amounts initially if that's not a food that you regularly consume. Actually, I do find that I love sweet potato, but that's definitely one that comes up when I talk to people. They're like, I don't eat that much. I could eat more. I just haven't really thought about it. So sometimes when we're talking to clients about different foods, it's really just understanding, what foods they've already been consuming and coming up with some new ideas of foods that we can introduce.
Yeah, so just a point on the prebiotics. So what the prebiotics do is feed the probiotics, so the bacteria in your gut. And what they can do is they can feed the wrong bacteria when there's that imbalance.
That's right.
So that is why we're very specific about when we introduce them, and making sure that your gut is at a state that we can start to increase the prebiotics, the food for the gut bacteria. Otherwise, you can get flare-ups. It can be quite bloating, cause a lot of gas, discomfort for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And there's symptoms to look out for as well. So if you've tried introducing different foods into your diet, on your own with your own research, and you find that foods that are indicated for being beneficial for our microbiome or digestive health that you notice actually create a flare-up, that's an indication that there is that gut lining inflammation, or what we call leaky gut, or there's a very high level of dysbiosis. And dysbiosis is that imbalance of bacteria. So I think it's important to understand that when we have those food reactions, is rather than because it can be very overwhelming and very frustrating for people as well, but understanding that there is a reason that your body is actually having that negative impact to that food, that for other people can actually be very helpful. But it comes down to the stage, or what else needs to be addressed as part of your digestive health.
Yes, and it's just made me think about apple cider vinegar. So that's another one.
That is
apple cider. Yeah.
That is a great one. That I missed that as well.
Yes. So apple cider vinegar is wonderful for helping the digestive system in regards to helping break down food at the stomach acid level, and maintaining correct pH in the gut. And it has lots of nutrients as well. But a lot of people are taking it thinking that it is going to help with their gut. And very often they're just taking it at the wrong time. They haven't healed their gut, and it's actually exacerbating their symptoms. So, yeah, there's just so many examples like that. And I think that's where we are trained very quickly to identify which foods are actually impeding their gut healing. And we can introduce them at a later date after they've gone through a gut healing protocol.
That's right, definitely. So that is when I go through a client's diet in their first consult, apple cider vinegar is often something that comes up, either that they have found helpful or that they have found that it had created quite the flare-up. So again, it just means that there's other things that we need to address first.
Yep.
So,
and fiber, too much fiber. We ultimately want a diet full of fiber, and that's all when we heal your gut.
Yep.
But some people's gut dysbiosis, inflammation, not the correct type of bacteria actually make it very hard for you to digest fiber. So you feel more constipated on a high fiber diet, there is gut dysfunction there. So one common fiber, or a couple of common fibers that people might go on to, is chia seed or psyllium husks to help with constipation. And for some people that just does not help at all.
Definitely, especially the psyllium. I think a lot of people have tried that because it's an old remedy. It's been around for a long time, and it's something you can easily mix up in water. And for some people, really helpful. But you're right, it definitely is one of those types of fiber that can really trigger much more of increase of bloating, especially constipation, even though that's one of the areas it's ideally recommended or to target, but yeah, causing more constipation. And it's important to drink plenty of water. That might seem really simple, but sometimes people start introducing those extra fibers in the diet but are not consuming enough liquids and good quality water. Can add herbal teas in there as well. But then there are other types of drinks that can be quite dehydrating. So high caffeinated drinks, coffee, certain teas and so on, that can be dehydrating, and we're not getting enough pure water or hydration in the body to support that extra fiber as well. So often the types of fiber, but introducing slow as well. Slow changes, small changes, not lots of things at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. And doing it very slowly, which makes me also bring up the point of some people think more is better, and that is not necessarily the case. And it's probably not the case in most of the situations. So not doing large doses of things, expecting better results. So
Actually, that reminds me of a great story of a client. This is quite a few years ago now, when kombucha was something really quite new, and we had talked about having a little bit of that, and we had already worked on the gut lining repair, and so we were really building on his microbiome. He was feeling great, and so we talked about starting to have a little bit of kombucha. And then the next time we spoke, about a month later, he said, "Oh, Amanda, I was feeling great, and now I'm just feeling so much worse." And I asked him a few questions, and he had started buying those really large bottles of kombucha, and instead of having just a small amount and spacing that out over 3 to 5 days, he was drinking a whole bottle every day, thinking, well, more is better. And for many reasons, when we look at the microbiome, more is not better. So then he was just consuming so much kombucha, and then it started to create an imbalance and a histamine response, which we had already addressed. So, but it did resolve quickly. It didn't reverse. He was like, "Oh my gosh, oh no, what have I done?" It didn't reverse all those months of great work. It just meant that if he just left it out for a little bit, then tried again, but just, very small glasses or small amounts. And then he found that balance, and then everything was, he was feeling great, and it was supporting his microbiome.
yes, and I think that just emphasizes how getting support from people that are trained, that can help guide you and support you through the way, as well as having the microbiome testing so we know exactly what's going on with the gut, actually helps people get results faster. So you're not spending money on things that are going to flare you up or maybe make things worse. So
Definitely.
yeah, the tailored approach and the support from experienced practitioners, I think, is the way to go if you're serious about wanting results with your gut.
Yeah, no, that's right. I agree. And, so many people who come to work with us, they have already spent so many years of trial and error, years of spending a lot of money on foods and supplements, and maybe having some benefits, but ultimately still having health issues that they're wanting help with. And so then we're able to start giving them very specific advice and support, and taking away all that confusion of why certain things that they thought would be very helpful ended up being, not for them personally. I would say most clients that come to see us have already tried at least a small number of things themselves, and ultimately they haven't, been able to address, their symptoms or their health issues.
The rewarding part of the job is to be able to get the results for the patients and see them thrive when they've struggled for so long.
Definitely, that's right.
That's what I do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I agree, Tracey, definitely. And because it is, and what we've been talking about is that whole difference between gut healing and gut health. And so for people who maybe do not actually have any major digestive symptoms, they're just wanting to support their immune system a little bit, or their overall energy, looking at those different options of foods that we can just introduce a little bit more that support our gut health. But for people who have those digestive issues, the bloating, the reflux, loose bowel motions, constipation, skin allergies, immune deficiencies or autoimmune conditions, or, the many other symptoms of pain and inflammation that can be triggered as well, that's where having that really specific approach, but often that, they're the sort of combination of symptoms that are indicating that a gut healing approach is so important. I had a client just recently actually, and she had seen a naturopath for about 7 years and had definitely had, many benefits with her health. She was taking a lot of different supplements, but ultimately her symptoms were still there. She just was in her 30s, and she was just thinking, oh my gosh, I ultimately just do not feel like I think I should be feeling for my age. And she did have a very long list of different health issues and symptoms. And so when I went through, initially I was looking at what maybe some of those supplements that were helpful, others that maybe were creating a bit of an issue for her or just not necessary at that point. And then looking at her microbiome test once we had that information, and that quite severe leaky gut and that very high LPS inflammation, they were a few other markers that showed up. So once we started to address that, she couldn't believe the benefits she felt in only 4 weeks. 4 weeks when we spoke after that first month, where I only put her on very few supplements. She had another 20 supplements at home that she had been taking, which I said, look, we don't want to waste them, but let's pop them aside for a little while because often they can be reintroduced later. And so just worked on a really minimal number of supplements, few different foods to focus on, some, smoothies and some really soothing foods. And she didn't have to make lots of changes with her diet. And 4 weeks later, she could not believe how well she was starting to feel. Her reflux had almost gone. Her bloating had hugely reduced. Nausea actually was a really big symptom for her that was becoming daily, a very debilitating symptom, affecting her ability to eat certain foods as well. And so all of those symptoms had almost gone after 4 weeks. And so it just shows that having a very specific approach just made all that difference. And now we're moving on to those next phases.
That is amazing. And, we do see those sorts of results, not with every single patient, of course, but often. So, I think it's nice for people to know that if they are struggling with health, that it is possible for them.
Definitely. That's right. So I think, this has been a really great discussion. I hope this has helped to identify some differences between gut healing and the approach that is needed to support that phase, and then the difference between more optimizing of gut health. Was there anything else, Tracey, that you wanted to mention?
No. I think we could certainly talk about foods and how they can heal or inflame. That could be a topic for another little podcast.
Definitely. No, we have endless things that we're going to be talking about. So thank you for listening. I hope you found that really helpful. If you would like to find out more about our approach and whether we can help with your health issues, please check out the link below. We do offer a free call just to chat, find out about your health issues and symptoms, and see whether our approach is helpful for you. So thanks for listening. Thanks, Tracey.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.